I was 19 cycles old when the contact appeared on my board, and I wrote it down as debris. That is the first thing I want the record to show. I was 19 cycles old. I had been assigned to the 3rd Sensing School aboard the convoy flagship Undulant Patience for 7 weeks. I had never seen a contact that could not be read. And so when the thing at the edge of my range refused to give back any of the impressions I sent toward it, no surface emotion, no ambient thought warmth, no fear residue from whoever had last piloted it. I checked my equipment twice, found nothing wrong, and wrote it down as debris. A hull fragment, probably. Something dead and old and drifting at the edge of the system. I logged it at the 17th hour of the transit shift. Senior Inductor Vane Toss read the entry over my shoulder, made a sound I would later come to understand as dismissal, and told me that cold contacts happened in deep space, when metal cooled to the temperature of the void. No mind leaves warmth on metal that has drifted for centuries. Nothing to read. Write it off. I wrote it off. This is my account of what followed, submitted to whatever archive still exists to receive it. I do not expect a reply. Convoy numbered 43 vessels. The Undulant Patience was the flagship. A sensing school command hull fitted with 4 perception projectors capable of mapping every conscious mind within 11 light minutes, amplifying fear into paralysis. Sensory reality through our collective inference until a target crew could not tell the difference between their bridge and their worst dream. We had pacified 6 contested systems with this equipment. We had never failed to read a target. The 42 escort and cargo ships behind us were adequate for conventional defense. We were not expecting conventional threats. We were transiting a declared quiet corridor, 14 days from our destination, carrying the genetic survey data for a new colonization axis that the Varathi hegemony had spent 12 years assembling. No hostile presence had been logged in this corridor for 60 years. I should have looked at the contact longer. I know that now. At the 19th hour, I felt something on the edge of my sensing range that I can only describe as a door opening somewhere very far away. Not a mind, not fear, not warmth. More like the opposite of warmth, a sudden absence where there had been nothing, replaced by a different kind of nothing. I marked it in my log as a sensor ghost and turned back to my calibration checks. Inductor Vane Toss came to stand behind me again at the 21st hour. He did not say anything for a long time. I could feel his attention, which for a Varathi is a physical thing. A pressure at the back of the skull, an awareness of being observed by something that observes with more than eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice had a quality I had not heard in it before. "Rerun your debris contact," he said. I did. The object was no longer where I had logged it. In 4 hours, while I had been calibrating and writing notes and eating my transit ration, it had moved. Not drifted. The vectors were wrong for drift. It had moved with purpose, at a velocity that put it 11,000 kilometers closer to the convoy than it had been when I first detected it. I looked at the size reading. I looked at it again. 340 meters from bow to stern. Beam of 61 meters at the widest point. Per mass readings that made the scanner throw an error code because the figure was outside the expected parameters for an object traveling at that speed. Something that heavy should not be able to move that fast without drives, that the archive said did not exist among human vessel classes. I sent the contact to Senior Inductor Vane Toss and watched his crest flatten. "Pull the archive index," he said, and his voice was very quiet. The archive system 4 minutes to return a result. Later when I reviewed the search log, I understood why. There were only 3 entries for that hull configuration in the entire Varathi contact database, and all 3 were tagged with a provenance marker I had never seen before. A yellow sigil that I had to look up. It translated approximately as considered historical, verify before operational use. The hull class was called a threshold dreadnought human construction. The entry said they had been built approximately 4,000 years prior, during a period of human expansion that the archive described in terms I had been taught were metaphorical. The Varathi linguists who had assembled the database had rendered the human name for that period as the Cutting. 4,000 years ago, in the Cutting, the humans had built 41 ships of this class. The archive said 38 had been destroyed in the conflicts of that era. The archive said the remaining 3 had been lost. I read that word. Lost. And I felt something move through my perception sense that I had no name for. Not fear, not warmth. Something older than either. Senior Inductor Vaintos ordered a full perception projection at the contact. All 4 projectors. Maximum range. Our best operators, the senior and second senior inducers, would push simultaneously. A reading so thorough that it had once mapped the entire crew manifest of a defended station from 6 light minutes away and returned with names. The projection went out. It came back, empty. Not empty the way a dead ship comes back empty. The faint metallic residue of old fear, old purpose. Old last thoughts soaked into bulkheads over decades. Empty the way a stone is empty. Empty the way a tide is empty. Perception weapon moved through whatever was inside that hull and found nothing to hold. Inductor Ventos said, very quietly, "There is no crew aboard." I checked the drive signatures again. The object, I could not call it debris anymore. Could not call it anything that implied it was passive. Was still closing. 14 kilometers per second relative. Consistent. Unhurrying. Automated, said the second senior inductor from across the station. Her name was Pel Oravash, and she had 20 years of deep survey experience. And she said the word, automated. The way I imagined someone might say the name of a disease they had hoped never to encounter. It is running on automated protocols. What she meant, what we all understood in the silence that followed, was that our weapon did not work on it. Our weapon worked on minds, amplified fear, projected false perception, rewired the chemistry of consciousness until a crew forgot which way was forward and which was surrender. We were the finest perception combat unit in the 3rd Hegemony Fleet. We had never encountered a vessel we could not read. The Iraeon, that was the name in the archive entry. I found it in the 3rd annotation. Human origin designation that the record keepers had preserved phonetically, had no minds aboard to read. 4,000 years ago, some human engineer had designed a vessel with one standing order and then put its crew into suspended preservation so deep that no perception scanner had ever detected them. The drive systems, the targeting architecture, threat response logic, all of it running on mechanisms that carried no consciousness, no fear, no thought, nothing for our projectors to find. We could not reach inside it. We could not confuse it. We could not make it see something that wasn't there. And it had been sleeping in the drift for 4,000 years, with one order loaded into its systems. And somewhere in the 21st hour of my shift, something had triggered it. The archive entry, I read this part 3 times, noted that the threshold dreadnoughts had been built with a specific activation protocol, a hostile scan, a perception probe above a certain intensity threshold, sustained for more than 2 seconds. We had sent 4 projectors at it simultaneously, at maximum range. I am 19 cycles old. I did not know. Senior Inductor Vane Toss ordered evasive dispersal. The convoy broke formation, 43 ships vectoring away from the contact on 6 separate escape headings, because a dispersed fleet is harder to engage sequentially than a tight formation. And we still believed, in those first minutes, that sequential engagement was the threat model we were dealing with. We were wrong about that. Tracked the Iraeon on my board for what happened next, because my job was to track contacts, and I did my job even when I did not want to. Matters. Someone needs to have written it down. The dreadnought did not pursue the fastest ship or the largest or the flagship. Engage the convoy in bearing order. The ships, as they had been arranged in the formation at the moment of activation, working through the list methodically, as if it were completing an administrative task. Vessel 4 in the formation had been a cargo hauler called the Murmured Agreement. She was gone at the 22nd minute. Vessel 7 had been a survey craft, entirely unarmed, 18 crew. She was gone at the 28th minute. Between those 2 losses, I watched the convoy's defense coordinator attempt to establish a firing solution. I watched him run it 3 times and get 3 different results, and I understood what I was seeing only later. The Iraeon was not moving in a straight line. It was moving in a curve so gradual that at any given second it appeared to be on a constant heading. Across 3 minutes of data, the arc was undeniable. It was threading the convoy. It knew where each ship was, and it was finding the most efficient path between them, and the most efficient path was not a straight line, and no one had written into the archive entry that the targeting logic of a threshold dreadnought could do that. I sent 3 perception probes at the Iraeon during this period. All 3 came back empty. Between the second and third probe, I found myself gripping the edge of my console with both hands. Not because I expected the probes to return anything different, but because I needed to be doing something. Dorothy sensing schools had been the decisive instrument of hegemony expansion for 200 years. Our perception weapon worked because every thinking creature fears something, and the ability to find that fear and make it large and real and immediate inside an enemy's mind had ended battles before they reached the weapons stage. We had walked into fortified positions and found them evacuated, because the garrison had felt us at the edge of their range and their nervous systems had decided correctly that staying was worse than running. We had ended wars by reading a single high command vessel and spreading its private dread across an entire fleet's channel. The Iraeon had no nervous system. It had no private dread. It had no high command aboard to read. The Undulant Patience's conventional weapons fired 63 times at the dreadnought during the 31st through 39th minutes of the engagement. I watched the readings from those strikes on the secondary board. The Iraeon's hull absorbed them. That is the only word I have. Absorbed. The weapons connected. The energy readings confirmed for detonation. The hull did not respond in any way the sensors could detect as damage. It was 340 meters of 4,000-year-old alloy moving through our convoy at 14 kilometers per second, and it was doing this because we had looked at it too hard. At the 43rd minute, the flagship's perception intelligence core attempted something that Senior Inductor Vayentos had never authorized in 20 years of deployment. He fed a false signal back along the path of our own projectors. A kind of recursive deception, an attempt to convince the Iraeon's targeting systems that there was no convoy here, that the space it occupied was empty, as if we could make the ship unsee us the way it had made us unsee what it was. The Iraeon adjusted heading by 4 degrees and came directly toward the Undulant Patience. I do not know if it was the signal that drew it. I do not know if the targeting logic had simply reached us in its sequence. The archive said the threshold dreadnoughts had been built to respond to threat intensity, and perhaps our flagship was the brightest thing on its board by then. 42 vessels destroyed or fleeing, one still projecting at full power, still trying to engage. Senior Inductor Verfant canceled the projection. He ordered all systems silent. He stood at the center of the command floor with his crest fully flattened, and his hands open at his sides, and he said, in a voice that carried no inflection at all hands to sealed compartments. He knew, and I knew, and everyone on that floor knew. You cannot hide from a targeting system by going quiet. Silence is not the same as absence. The Iraeon had been silent for 4,000 years, and it had still been there. I kept my hands on my board. Job was to track contacts, and I tracked this one. Range: 800 kilometers, 750, 700. At 612 kilometers, the Iraeon fired for the first time at the Undulant Patience. The first strike was a ranging shot, I think, although I cannot be certain. The archive had very little on threshold dreadnought weapons systems, because no Varathi scanner had apparently survived the experience of being ranged by one. The ranging shot removed the forward perception array from our hull as cleanly as something removes a branch from a tree. Senior Inductor Ventos was standing in the center of the floor when this happened. I saw him close his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he looked at me. I was the junior officer on the floor, the 19-cycle-old recruit who had written the contact down as debris, and he said, "Complete the log." He did not say it with anger. He did not say it with despair. He said it the way he had said everything across my 7 weeks aboard the Undulant Patience, with the flat expectation of a senior officer who believed that process and record-keeping had value regardless of outcome, that the act of documentation was not diminished by the circumstances it documented. I have thought about this since. I have had several minutes to think about it. I believe he was right, so I am completing the log. The archive was wrong about almost everything. The entry said, lost. Meaning the hegemony did not know where the last 3 threshold dreadnoughts had gone. It did not mean they had been destroyed. It did not mean they had simply drifted forever without purpose. The humans who built them had put them somewhere and loaded them with an order and gone away, and the 4,000-year-old math of that order was still running. I have been trying to understand why, and I think I have the answer, though I cannot be certain. In the cutting, humans fought wars of a scale that the Varathi archive records with the kind of brevity that I now understand is not laziness, but the failure of language to accommodate number. The threshold dreadnoughts were not warships in the sense we understand warships. Tools deployed and recovered, maintained and crewed and returned home. They were a message sent forward through time. A thing the humans of 4,000 years ago built and aimed at the future, as if they knew that the future would eventually do something to deserve it. The message is this: we were here. We built this. If you are reading this with your minds and your perception weapons, and your soft, clever tools that work on consciousness, then you have told our dreadnought that you exist, and it will handle the rest. Perception weapon is the finest instrument of its kind in the Third Fleet. It has never failed to read a target, read the Iraean, and got back nothing. And we thought that meant the ship was empty. It was not empty. It was just very, very patient. The 9 vessels of the convoy are confirmed destroyed. The remaining 4 are on dispersal vectors and may be beyond the Iraean's operational range. I do not know. My sensors are degraded. I am working from what I have. The dreadnought is 600 meters off our port quarter, and it has not fired again. I do not know why. I do not know if it is waiting, or if the second strike is already computed and I simply cannot see it coming, or if there is some logic in its targeting systems that I will never be able to model, because I am not the kind of mind that built it. Senior Inductor Vayantas is not on the floor anymore. Most of the floor is not on the floor anymore. I am 19 cycles old, and my name is Tessavar Olnhareth, Junior Scanner, 3rd Sensing School, Varathi Hegemony Convoy Undulant Patience, and this is my complete and accurate log of contact with an object I catalogued as debris at the 17th hour of my transit shift. Do not scan it. I want to be very clear about this. Whatever archive receives this record, whatever inductor reviews it, whatever hegemony command authority convenes to discuss what happened in this corridor on this transit. The instruction is simple, and it has no exceptions. Do not scan it. The Iraean does not need to be provoked. It does not need to be engaged. It does not need to be found or communicated with, or warned or reasoned with. There is nothing aboard it to reason with. 4,000 years of human engineering with a standing order. And the standing order is not complicated, and the only way to not be included in its execution is to leave it alone. We found it. We scanned it. We sent our best weapon at it because we had always been able to read what we scanned, and we were wrong. And now I am the last person on this floor completing this log, because my senior inductor told me to. The Iraean is still 600 meters off our port quarter. I don't think it's waiting. I think it's already done with us and moving back to whatever bearing it was holding before we found it, settling into the drift, going quiet, again for the next 4,000 years or the next convoy, that decides to look too closely at something cold and old and silent in the dark. I think the archive entry was right about one thing at least. They are lost. We just didn't understand what kind of loss that was. Log ends.